Good afternoon, folks, and welcome back to the Bible in 365. Today we're taking a look at Genesis chapter 35 through Genesis chapter 37, ending in verse 24. Let's get started. All right, folks, so our story picks up in Genesis chapter 35. It says, "Then God said to Jacob, 'Go up to Bethel and settle there, and build an altar to God, who appeared to you when you were fleeing from your brother Esau.' So Jacob said to his household and to all who were with him, 'Get rid of the foreign gods you have with you, and purify yourselves, and change your clothes. Then come, let us go to Bethel, where I will build an altar to God, who answered me in the day of my distress, and who has been with me wherever I have gone.'" If you remember back to when the Lord appeared to Jacob, Jacob kind of made this bargain with God and said, "If you are with me wherever I go, and you provide for me clothes, food, and shelter, then truly you will be my God." Things have come full circle, and Jacob has finally realized that God has provided for him. And so there at Bethel, he sets up an altar to the Lord and claims that the Lord is now his God and his only God. Picking up in verse 9, it tells us that Jacob returned from Padan Aram, and God appeared to him again and blessed him and said that his name should no longer be Jacob. This is the second time that the biblical text tells us this. God said to him, "Your name is Jacob, but you will no longer be called Jacob. Your name will be Israel." And so he named him Israel. Thereafter, it tells us of how God reaffirms his covenant unto Abraham and his descendants. And he says, "I am the God Almighty. Be fruitful and increase in number." Picking up in verse 16 of chapter 35, it tells us that at this point in time, they move from Bethel. Rachel is pregnant and gives birth to a second son. It does tell us that she names him Benjamin as she breathed her last breath. And so Rachel dies, and she's buried on the road to Ephrath, which is also known as Bethlehem. And after her death, it says that Israel moved on again and pitched his tent beyond Migdal Eder. That is in verse 21, and this is significant because it is the first time that Jacob is now referred to as Israel within the story, not simply God naming him Israel, but calling him Israel. And the text picks up and uses that terminology of him as Israel. Now here it does give us a little bit of a genealogy of Jacob's 12 sons, and it does tell us that Jacob comes home to his father Isaac. At this point in time, Isaac is 180 years old. Isaac passes away and he dies. He breathes his last breath, and Jacob and Esau bury their father Isaac. All right, moving forward to chapter 36. Chapter 36 is quite interesting. It tells us of all of the descendants that are given to Esau. So it is a genealogy. A few things that are important here is it tells us that Esau and his descendants are growing so large, the land that they're living in can no longer support both Jacob and Esau. So Esau picks up and he moves and he settles in the hill country of Seir. And then it does tell us that Esau, also known as Edom, is the father of the people who will become known as the Edomites. And so it gives us more of the genealogy. Within this chapter, it also tells us of the rulers that come from Edom or from Esau. And then the chapter ends by telling us the chiefs that descended from Esau. Our story picks up in chapter 37. We've just finished looking at Esau and his descendants, his lineage, and now we're going to take a look at Jacob and his lineage. So it tells us that Jacob lived in the land of Canaan where his father stayed. And it tells us in verse 2, this is the account of Jacob's family line. Now, it is here that it begins to tell us the story of Joseph. Joseph is 17, and he is one of the sons of Rachel, and it tells us that Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons that had been born to him, because Joseph was born to him in his old age. Now, because of this favoritism that Israel had towards Joseph, none of Joseph's brothers could stand him. They wouldn't talk to him. They wouldn't speak a kind word of him. Now, the situation is complicated because Joseph has two dreams. In the first of those dreams, he tells his brothers that he has a sheaf of grain, and their sheaves of grain bow down to his. This dream is interpreted as his brothers bowing down to him. This makes them angry and bitter. Joseph has a second dream, which is similar to the first. And it is in this dream that the moon and the sun and the 11 stars bow down to him. This makes Joseph's brothers jealous of him. And so it's at this point in time that the story tells us that his brothers are off shepherding the flocks near Shechem. And so Israel, their father, sends Joseph to him to kind of check up on them, to see how they're doing, and to bring back a report. So he goes off looking for them, and he eventually finds them near Dothan. And it is here that they begin to plot to kill him. They say, "Here comes the dreamer. Come on, let's kill him." And so they're mocking him, and they devise this plan to kill him and to throw him into a cistern and to say that one of the wild animals had devoured him. Now the oldest of the sons, Reuben, he overhears this, and in an attempt to save Joseph's life, he convinced them, "Hey, let's don't shed any blood, but let's just throw him into the cistern here in the wilderness, and let's not lay a hand on him." And Reuben's plan was to rescue him and to take him back to his father. And so it tells us that when Joseph arrived, they stripped from him this ornate robe that his dad had made for him, and they throw him into the cistern, which was empty and had no water in it. It is here, with Joseph at the bottom of this cistern, that our reading ends for tonight. We will pick back up with this story tomorrow as we take a look at Genesis chapter 37, starting in verse 25, and read until Genesis chapter 40, ending in verse 8. As always, God bless.